Hello everybody, so this is going to be my full in-depth guide for Devastation Evoker. I'll pretty much be going over everything that I personally know, everything that you need to know, and pretty much everything there is about Evoker. So what I have here is a little list. This list is basically going to be everything inside the video. If I have left anything out, of course you can comment down below if you know any, small tricks and tips and stuff, etc. What is Devastation Evoker and how does it play? What hero talents does Devastation have? Scalecommander and Flameshaper rotations with openers and outside of openers, so kind of like filler kind of stuff. Utility and Evoker buff. The reason why you pretty much want to bring at least one Evoker to a raid. And then what secondary stats do Scalecommander and Flameshaper want? Besides this list, there might be some other like smaller stuff added to this, but this is going to be the core topic of this guide. So let's get started off with what is Devastation and how does it play. So Devastation Evoker is a 25-yard range max mid-caster that has extremely high burst and sustained damage, especially at the start of pulls. With our mastery, we actually do reverse execute, meaning that we do most of our damage at the start of a pull, and we do, okay to slightly lower damage at the very end of pulls. It actually is capped at 30% remaining health for enemies, so even if enemies were at 5% or 10% remaining health, we would still be doing as much if they had 30% health. Situations that would be good in are pretty much any phase 1 kind of bosses, like think of Razga, for example, where you really wanted to get through phase 1. Devastation Evokers were pretty much the prime target to have in your raid comp. Besides that, Evokers in general, it's not really Devastation specific, but Evoker in general, they have very good utility and healing / damage mitigation. With some of the hero talents that Devastation has, we were actually really good when it comes to healing mitigation, specifically with the fact that we can actually put our Renewing Blaze on anybody now, especially tanks. Renewing Blaze, in my opinion, is one of the strongest healing mitigations like that in the entire game. Other than that, it is very flexible. You can pretty much play in all content and at all levels. It's a very fun class. I wouldn't say it's that high-paced, but a lot of your gameplay is practically forgiving. We're more of a play on proc kind of class rather than a very strict rotation that some classes have. Evoker specific, but extremely strong for Devastation is the fact that we do have 2 empowered spells that relate to our damage. One of them is Fire Breath. It does a lot of initial damage while having the rest of the damage be over time. No matter pretty much what empower level that you have Fire Breath at, it'll always do the same amount of damage, but it'll essentially change the course of play based on what level. So level 1, you'll do okay initial damage, and you'll have a lot of that damage be spread out over time, whereas if you were to fully empower it, it would do most of that damage all in one go, and then very small amounts over time. Our second empowered spell is Eternity Surge, which allows us to essentially condense high burst blue damage towards enemies. Every single empower level will essentially allow you to hit more and more targets. Besides that, as I said, Evoker is a very fun spec to play, or Devastation specifically is very fun. Obviously, it's a bit overshadowed by augmentation, but if you don't see that as a problem, it is the perfect class to play for you. So starting off with hero talents, Devastation has access to 2 of them. One of them is Scalecommander, the other is Flameshaper. They have pretty much polar opposite playstyles, although Flameshaper, if you enjoyed playing Devastation as a whole, it's more in line with having your core gameplay as your means of doing damage, whereas Scalecommander, it actually changes it up quite a bit. So we're going to start off with Scalecommander. So the first thing with it that makes it completely different is Mass Disintegrate. Pretty much both of your empowered spells will cause your next Disintegrate, which is our single target spender, to basically be AoE. It'll hit up to 3 targets, but only that first cast after using an empowered spell. We'll pretty much go down the middle of the tree as we did in our previous hero talent showcase. Starting off with Bombardments, Mass Disintegrate marks your target for destruction for the next 6 seconds. You and your allies have a chance to trigger a bombardment when attacking a marked target, dealing X amount of volcanic damage, splitting amongst all nearby enemies. So every single Mass Disintegrate will essentially apply bombardments, and as I said, and as this says as well, Not only you, but pretty much anybody else who's actually hitting the enemy will have a chance to proc this. It does okay damage, it's not the greatest, so I wouldn't have your entire playstyle be around constantly trying to get bombardments. Visually, they're quite possibly the coolest thing for Evoker. It's essentially just Evokers flying in and obviously bombarding the enemy. Wing Leader, bombardments reduce the cooldown of Deep Breath by 1 second for each target struck, up to 3. If you talent into it correctly, so think of it as like Lay Waste and then Onyx Legacy. In the optimal scenario, you will always have your Deep Breath pretty much up every 25 to 30 seconds, maybe a tiny bit more depending on the pulls that you're doing, but it'll be up about every 30 seconds. Beforehand, it wasn't actually doing a lot of damage, but the fact that we can actually take both of these now. Deep Breath actually is one of our highest hitting damage abilities, especially over time. So if you ever are at the very end of a dungeon and you look at your details meters, it actually will be right up there with Pyre, Disintegrate, Fire Breath, Eternity Surge, stuff like that. Seeing that is actually very cool. Besides that, you're actually able to steer with Deep Breath now, as it'll probably showcase in this. Anyways, so this is our first two-choice node. Essence abilities extend bombardments by 1 second, and then bombardments have a chance to generate Essence Burst. You probably don't want to ever take Diverted Power, because in Season 1, our tier set, especially our 4-piece, every single time we use our Eternity Surge will allow us to have Essence, like a chance, or not a chance, but it'll give you 1 thing of Essence Burst. So taking this will basically make you Essence Flooded. So it's not optimal, it's not really good. So you always want to take Extended Battle. Maneuverability, Deep Breath can now be steered in your desired direction. In addition, Deep Breath will now burn targets for X amount of volcanic damage over 12 seconds. As I said, you are now able to steer it as so. You can basically steer in any direction, and if you want to cancel it early, you just have to press the button again. So like if you wanted to go from here to like here, you just go that direction and immediately press it again once you're over there. So that way you don't steer into like walls or steer off the edge, you know, etc. You can stop it immediately or at any time you really chose to use. So going to the left side of the tree, Might of the Black Dragonflight. Black spells deal 20% increased damage, so think of it as our bombardments or our Deep Breath. Those are our only 2 spells that deal black damage. All in all, it's pretty good, I guess. Deep Breath now causes enemies to take 20% increased damage from bombardments and essence abilities. This is melt armor. This is actually something that you will also see do a lot of damage on your meters. It's a really, really good thing, and obviously this does a lot of damage. Hardened Scales, Obsidian Scales reduces damage taken by an additional 10%, so it's up to 40 now if you take this. And then knocking enemies back or up or backwards reduces their damage down to by 15% for 8 seconds. I don't think you would ever choose this unless you were in outdoor content, but still having the 10%, making our Obsidian Scales now reduce 40% for X amount of seconds is all around really good. Now, the right side of the tree, Onslaught. Entering combat grants a charge of Burnout, causing your next Living Flame to cast instantly. You are pretty much, like me or anybody else who plays Devastation knows that having Burnout procs is pretty much the best thing in the world. Hard casting Living Flame obviously isn't the worst, but it's still something you don't want to do a lot of. Because you can obviously be spending Essence Burst, you can be spending all of your Essence, rather than just continuously hard casting Living Flame without having Burnout procs. For each second that you're in combat, Azure Strike, Living Flame, and Disintegrate deal 1% increased damage up to 15. Basically just us doing more damage the longer we're in combat, so up to 15 seconds all of those spells, as I just listed, will be doing 50% in total, and that will last until the very end of combat. So the last 2-choice node, while hovering, damage taken from area of effects attacks is reduced by 10%, and then Deep Breath now resets the cooldown of hover. I don't think you'd ever choose the Slipstream other than maybe if you're in outdoor content and you're trying to get somewhere very fast. Otherwise, you would just take this. So those are the Scalecommander. Let me switch to Flameshaper really quickly. So Flameshaper, their unique thing is Engulf. Engulf or engulf your target in Dragon Flame, damaging them for X amount of fire, or healing them for X amount of health. For each of your periodic effects that you have on the target, the effectiveness, aka the damage, is increased by 15 or 50%. So think of it as your Fire Breath over time damage, your Enkindle that will be on your Essence abilities, we'll go over that in a second, and then Ruby Embers for your Living Flame, so you would actually be taking Ruby Embers to increase it by another 50%. So that would be up in total to 150%. So as Scalecommander, we'll be going down the middle of the tree. So Traveling Flame Engulf increases the duration of Fire Breath by 8 seconds and causes it to spread to a target within 25 yards. Basically just having more dot damage and having it last longer. So having it at rank 1 is especially even better. So that means even if you have it at rank 1, it'll last for a total of 32 seconds instead of 24 if you don't have Phantom Magic. And it'll last even longer if you do have Phantom Magic. Burning Adrenaline, Engulf quickens your pulse, reducing cast time of your next spell by 30%, stacking up to 2 charges. And then Red Hot, Engulf has 1 additional charge and does 20% increased damage and healing. Pretty nice. Consume Flame, Engulf consumes 4 seconds of Fire Breath from the target, detonating it and damage all nearby enemies equal to 300% of the amount consumed, reduced beyond 5 targets. Pretty much, as I said, this is when it comes to the melt armor thing that Scalecommander had, this actually will be a large amount of damage. It'll actually do more damage than Engulf, depending on how often your Engulf crits. I have actually noticed that the Engulf playstyle is, it feels really bad if it doesn't crit, but it feels really rewarding when it does. And as I said, you're pretty much up to whether or not it crits or not. So going down the left side, we have our first 2-choice node. Trailblazer Hover and Deep Breath travel 40% faster, and Hover travels 40% farther. Overall, really good, but make sure you don't like knock yourself off the edge of a platform or something. And then the other one, Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet, scorch enemies and blind them with Ash, causing their next attack within 4 seconds to miss. I could see you taking this in very high M+ keys if you really wanted to allow your tank to not have to take as many hits. This is actually one of the options for Evoker in general, specifically Devastation, that, in all honesty, it's actually really good. Like, this is the first one, and probably the only one, where you can actually take it based on situation and not just have one node be taken in 99% of the content. I think this is really good, and I think more of this should actually exist. Alright, Conduit of Flame, critical strike chance against targets above 50% is increased by 10%. All around really good, especially in Engulf, as I stated earlier. Titanic Precision, Living Flame, and Azure Strike have 1 extra chance to trigger Essence Burst when they critically strike. All in all, really good. The right side of the tree, Essence abilities are enhanced with Flame, dealing 20% of healing or damage done as fire damage over 8 seconds, is the Enkindle that I was talking about. So basically, any of our Essence abilities, so like Disintegrate and Pyre, they'll pretty much have our Season 2 and Season 4 tier set added to them. Alright, the next 2-choice node is Fan the Flames, casting Engulf Renix all Enkindles, increasing the remaining damage or healing over time by 100%. It's basically our 4-piece. And then the other one is Fire Breath's damage over time is increased by 20%. Deep Breath's heal over time. This is the Preservation Empowered spell. Their overtime is increased by 20% as well. The last one is Life Sender's Renewing Blaze, also applies to your target or one nearby injured ally at 50% of the value. So if you really wanted to, you can have this go on your tank. It's a really, really strong life loss healing mitigation. Really, really good. And then the other one is your wounds have a small chance to cauterize, healing you for 30% of damage taken. Occurs more often from attacks that deal a high amount of damage. This high amount of damage is about 30% of your health that's taken, like, instantly. I believe it's around that. I could be wrong, but all in all, again, you can take this situationally. You can obviously take Draconic Instincts and outdoor content, but having Renewing Blaze inside high-end content like M+ and Raids, you'd probably want to have Renewing Blaze added to another target that you have more than this. So when it comes to the utility that Evoker brings, it's not really Devastation related. Devastation actually brings absolutely nothing that Evoker overall does not. We have knockups, we have CCs, we have stuns, etc. We have AoE damage reduction, we have a pretty unique thing that allows us to reduce the cooldown or essentially grant a free charge of any movement speed spell that you have. When it comes to the knockups, knockbacks, etc., we have our Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe. Our Wing Buffet allows us to essentially knock back enemies. So the line that you see, like, let me just use Wing Buffet right here. So you may notice that it's actually in a triangle formation. However, do not let that deceive you. You can actually knock enemies away not only in front of you, but to the side of you as well. It's actually in a character model. Think of it as a half circle. So I actually drew it up in paint right here. So imagine the circle. Here, actually, I need to show it on OBS. So imagine the circle is you. Instead of it being front facing, it's actually like this. So the red area is actually what your Wing Buffet will hit. And the cool thing about it is, instead of it knocking enemies away from you in front of you, it'll actually follow this. So, for example, like this. So any enemy that is in direct relation to you in that half circle, they will actually be knocked back in that general direction. So I actually did have a small clip that I wanted to do to kind of like show this off. So like if you were ever in any situation that required you to like knock an enemy towards a different direction, but in order to do that, you would have to like space it properly and you just didn't have enough time. This is kind of like one of those moments where this would be very, very useful. So let me play right here. So the little enemy right there, couldn't get directly behind him, so I used that to my advantage by knocking him to the side with a Wing Buffet, even if I didn't directly face it towards him. Other than that, when it comes to the raid cooldown that Evoker brings, we actually have Blessing of the Bronze. It allows us to reduce 15% of any movement speed spell, or basically any kind of like movement speed cast that people may have. It works for the party and the entire raid. When it comes to AoE damage mitigation, we have Zephyr. It reduces 20% of area of effect, and it also allows you to increase movement speed for 30 seconds for 8 seconds. When it comes to another utility that we have that can either be raid or party-wide, is Time Spiral. It allows us to bend times for us and allies within 40 yards to cast their major movement speed ability basically any time within the next 10 seconds. So even if, like, let's say my hover is my main movement speed ability. If I cast Time Spiral, I'll get an extra charge of it for free, but I have to use that within the 10 seconds of me getting it. In terms of cleanses, we have Expunge and Cauterizing Flame. Expunge is basically just our normal poison dispel. Cauterizing Flame is a very, very strong dispel for us. It's on a 1-minute cooldown. Expunge is on a 8-second. Cauterizing Flame can basically dispel anything in the game that is not magic. If you were Preservation Evoker, our magic dispel would actually be Expunge, if you were wondering that. And then yes, obviously, since we are a caster, we do have... Well, it's not unique to every single caster, but we are in fact a caster that does have a res. It is not a battle res, but it is a res nonetheless. It is a very slow res. It has a 9-second cast. Other than that, yeah, so when it comes to the rooting or stunning, our landslide basically allows us to root any enemy that's within this. Deep Breath, we actually have a passive called Terror of the Skies. Any enemy that's been hit by a Deep Breath stuns them for 3 seconds, and then our other stun is Sleepwalk. This is our basically our single target stun. If you were to use it on stuff like Incorporeal, this is exactly what you would use it on, and stuff like that. Other than that, that is basically all the utility that we have. It's quite a lot, but it's basically average for any particular class. So the next thing on the list is secondary stats for Devastation Evoker. Scalecommander and Flameshaper, although I believe it's widely known that you pretty much only want to follow the Scalecommander stats that I have listed above. I personally think that Flameshaper would actually be a bit different in terms of scaling. I think we'll have a better idea once we get more eye levels, and of course once we get further into the upcoming seasons. But as follow, I believe this is exactly how it'll be. When it comes to Scalecommander, obviously, or not just Scalecommander, but Devastation overall, we'll always want Intellect over anything else. For Scalecommander, we'll want Crit, pretty much greater than or equal to Haste, and then everything else as follows. As you see, you want more Haste than you do Mastery, and you want more Mastery than you do Versatility. Obviously, I wouldn't go overboard when it comes to each individual stat. You still want a lot of pretty much everything. Like you especially don't want 0 versatility if you plan on doing higher and higher end content. Whereas if you're doing low end content, obviously like you don't want to skimp out on mastery, etc. Like all of these stats are really good and they do really well for what they achieve, or what they basically want you to achieve. And then for Flameshaper, I actually believe that Flameshaper will want more mastery than haste. I could be wrong, but due to the fact that it is so heavily reliant on you actually getting crits, if you have a lot of mastery and a lot of crit, you'll essentially achieve very, very explosive high numbers. So as I said before, the rotation for Devastation Evoker is actually very simple. We are a class that basically only reacts off of procs rather than a strict rotation every single time. However, I will say for Scalecommander specifically and Flameshaper, or at least our opening rotation is a little strict. You at least want to get certain spells out, otherwise you are just spending your essence. So I will be showcasing every single build, so I'll be doing the opening rotation for Flameshaper Scalecommander, and I will also be doing the Firestorm build variant of both of them as well. So 4 things in total. For each of them as well, I will be doing AoE. However, it's basically the exact same principle when it comes to single target. Instead of using Pyre, you just use Disintegrate. So as Scalecommander, this is what we'll be starting out with. You'll first want to cast Living Flame. Straight into Deep Breath, you want to cancel it early. You want to Dragon Rage straight into Fire Breath, Shattering Star, and then Eternity Surge. Then you want to get all of your Mass Disintegrates out at once. You want to have them fully cast. And then with Charge Blast, depending on the amount of stacks you have, you always want to try to use it at 20. You will just constantly use them and just continuously just spam your essence. You want to tip the scales a second Fire Breath, straight into another Shattering Star, then Eternity Surge, and then get all of your Mass Interrupts out of the way for your bombardments, and then just continue spamming your essence spells. And it basically goes as the following. So if you are someone who actually listens to me say every single individual spell name, you can do that. I actually do know that there's quite a lot of people out there who jot down the openers so that they can like redo it themselves. If you don't want to do that, I actually have the spell thing right down here. The leftmost spell is my most recent spell that I've used, so instead of listening to me, you can also just look at that as well. And yeah, that'll be the same for all the individual ones. So here's the Flameshaper one. Alright, so for the Flameshaper opener, it's pretty much exactly how you remembered back in Dragonflight. If you are more keen to playing the core gameplay that you had with Devastation, then Flameshaper actually will probably be for you. If you want a little bit different, then you can obviously play Scalecommander, but pretty much goes as following. So, as before, and as you've always done, you want to precast your Living Flame. Before I actually do that, I actually will explain a little bit. So when it comes to Flameshaper, as I have explained before, its effectiveness, aka its damage, is increased by 50% for every single periodic damage that you have on an enemy. So when it comes to Flameshaper, we will be taking Ruby Embers, which will essentially apply an additive dot to our Living Flame. That will count as 1. Then the second damage over time is our Fire Breath, of course, and then our Enkindle, which works off of our Spenders. So as I said, the rotation will still be the same, and it goes as follows. So you will Living Flame, straight into Dragon Rage, you will Fire Breath, straight into Shattering Star, then Eternity Surge. You will cast 1 Deep Breath to get 1 Enkindle off, and then you will use both Engulfs, and then straight back into your normal rotation as you were used to before. You want to use as much essence as you can. Try not overcapping on it. You want to use both of your burnout procs if you can. Tip the scales to second Fire Breath, Shattering Star, Eternity Surge, then just go back to spending essence. It's basically as simple as that. When it comes to using your engulfs, try to use your engulfs when you have all 3 of the dots on a particular enemy to get max effectiveness out of it. That's basically your main source of damage for Flameshaper. Otherwise, it's basically the same core gameplay as you had with Devastation. So the rotation for the Firestorm variant of the build is exactly the same as if you were playing without it, except you will want to put Firestorm down basically right before you start like spamming essence spells. So I won't go over the jibber jabber that I did before. I'll just go into the rotation then as I did before and just showcase it here. So again, precast Living Flame straight in the Deep Breath. You want to place down your Firestorm before you do anything, and then Dragon Rage into Fire Breath, Shattering Star, Eternity Surge. You want to get both of your Mass Disintegrates out of the way, and then to start spamming your essence spells. You want to always spend your burnout procs as you can, and can just continually spam your spells. So my Firestorm is coming up now. I want to place that before anything else. Then I want to tip the Scales, Fire Breath, straight in the Shattering Star, then Eternity Surge, and then just continuously spam my essence spells. So as I said, the same for AoE or single target. If it's single target, use Disintegrate, AoE, Pyre, and you basically just want to use Firestorm as another spell similar to Shattering Star. It'll just allow you to do more damage with your essence spells. And last but not least, this is the Firestorm variant of the Flameshaper build. I know I rambled on a little bit before with this, so I'll just go straight into it. You want to precast Living Flame, then you want to get your... Oh, I just lost it. You want to get your Firestorm out, you want to Dragon Rage straight into Firestorm, Shattering Star, Tornado Surge, then you want to use both of your engulfs, and then just keep spamming your essence spells. And as I said in the Scalecommander, use the Firestorm window as another Shattering Star. It'll always do more damage for your essence spells, so you always want to use like a huge round of essence spells beforehand. Yep, so you want to tip the Scales, second Fire Breath, then back in the Shattering Star, then Eternity Surge, and just continuously spam your spells inside of that Firestorm window. Use it, as I said, use it as a Shattering Star window. Try to save as many Essence Burst, or just any amount of Essence as possible, so you can get as many Essence Benders inside that tiny window. After the change, it'll actually only be 10 seconds. In fact, it actually already is 10 seconds now. I forgot it's Tuesday. So, within that 10-second window, use that to your full advantage with your Essence spells. You'll do a lot more damage. Alright, so as a conclusion for this Devastation Evoker guide, I actually will be showcasing one more thing. I know this guide overall is actually very simple. I pretty much prefer it to be very simple. However, if you want to know more about anything involving Devastation or just Evoker in general, you actually can join my Discord down below. It is now open to the public. I actually finished it. It actually took me quite a while to finish it, mainly because I was just busy with other stuff. The very last thing that I actually do want to show is a neat little trick to not necessarily increase your damage, but increase your damage output. So I've made a video about this before, but I'm actually going to shove it into this guide now. It allows you to get more damage out more quickly than usual. So it involves the clipping with Disintegrate. I know a lot of people might not know this, but it's actually a very useful tip if you're trying to burst on an enemy like really, really quickly. So I will actually turn off the nameplates for enemies, so it's actually easier to see the text. And I will Dragon Rage for this to get 2 Essence procs. So I will only show this once, maybe show it twice. You always want to cast, and then cast another Disintegrate. And then the third cast of Disintegrate, whenever you bring 1 tick of damage over to the next, it will always do double damage on that very first tick. So whenever you do clip, like any remaining essence that you haven't used that, or not essence, damage that you haven't used with your Disintegrate will always get shoved into the next Disintegrate. However, this little neat trick only works on every 3rd Disintegrate. So as I said, when it comes to using your Disintegrate, it always works on your 3rd one. So as follow, I'm going to get a stack of essence here. I'm going to clip to the 3rd one, and then boom. I'll always get a second charge, or a second tick of damage instantly on top of the very first tick on top of the third disintegrate. Use that any way you can. It, as I said, doesn't increase your damage at all. It only gets 2 ticks of damage out at once. It's actually very, very useful, as I said, if you want to burst something down very quickly, or if you're just in outdoor content. Otherwise, I really wouldn't worry about something like this. This is a very niche thing to do. But anyways, as I said, if you enjoyed the guide, or if you have any questions, as I said, leave them down in the comments below. My Discord is in the description, along with any other bit of information. Every single talent build that I have showcased in this video, including any other remaining talents that are of course on Wellhead, I will have linked down in the description as well. As I said before, I know this guide is very simple, and as I said, I meant it to be that. I like simple things like this. I like easy to read. Getting straight to the points with everything, not like sugarcoating everything or whatever. Not adding multiple layers like I'm doing right now. If you have any questions involving more complex stuff, of course you can ask down in the comments below. But also join my Discord. I'll be answering anything that you have there. I actually prefer it to be that way. And, yeah. I hope you enjoyed the War Within guide for Devastation Evoker, and if there are any other new things that get added, or like anything else changes in the future, I will be sure to create another guide for it, or simply just update it with this guide. That's it, as I said, I hope you enjoyed.